Welcome to Passioneer Magazine, the podcast, where you'll hear inspirational stories, encouraging news, and in-depth interviews with authors, influencers, CEOs, and thought leaders. Passioneer Magazine, the podcast. Bold ideas, brave pursuits, boundless inspiration. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining me, Dez, for Passioneer Magazine, the podcast. So glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, I cannot wait to share all that you do, how you do it, and inspire someone to perhaps step out and make it happen in their own lives. But I realize that there may be someone who's unfamiliar with you, and this is the first time they're being introduced to you. So my first question is, what makes you you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks for asking. This is a funny question to answer because it's like, do I go with my career? Do I go with something else? But as a career, primarily, I am a trainer of holistic coaches. That's primarily what I do. Life coaches, wellness coaches, business coaches, but I'm also a film producer and I'm also a lot of other things, right? So I think primarily I would call myself a professional coach, trainer, and meaningful media producer.
Ooh, I like that meaningful media producer because that's what it's about, right? Putting something out there that is meaningful, not only to yourself, but to those that will be viewing your product. I love that. I love that. Now, with the all that you do, can you tell us a little bit about what sparked your journey? So many of the people that I've had the privilege of interviewing, be it that they were authors or CEOs or mompreneurs, there was a moment for them that really was that catalyst. What really sparked your fire for that?
I absolutely remember this moment. The first, moments I think sometimes happen over days or weeks or months. But I remember having my son on a Monday, but my last day at work was the Friday right before that. Like I had worked all the way up through my pregnancy, knowing that I was going to have, a scheduled birth. And I remember thinking, wow, that's kind of bizarre that I'm working on a Friday and having a baby on a Monday. Like, why didn't I take more time for myself? So when my son was 3, I was home with my son. I was so privileged to be home with him because I wasn't home with my daughter. And I really felt like I missed out. So at 3 years old, my son, I'm looking at him in the living room. My husband's there and he says, why don't you do what you do for your clients for yourself? Meaning at the time I was a marketing coach.
Yeah.
You know how you're making all those people famous and rich? Why don't you do that for yourself? And my first thought was, I want to train coaches because I was a coach. And then he said, I don't think you're going to ever work for anyone else ever again. And when he said that, I was just like, wow, like it made sense when he said it like that.
Yeah.
But I grew up in a blue collar neighborhood in Chicago. I didn't think about that kind of stuff growing up. So that sparked my interest, at least, of doing this on my own.
Hmm. Oh, I love how he just kind of spoke that into being, right? He just spoke that into your life and that clicked. I love that. It is so important the people that we have around us. And that's an example why, right? Because he could have gone in the other direction, but thank God he went in that direction instead and really sparked something in you. I love that. Now, you do a lot of humanitarian work. You're an entrepreneur, you're a coach or a trainer for coaches. Like you wear a lot of hats. With that being said, how do you approach the blending of all of that while still being uniquely you? How do you allow your professional and your personal to not blend too much so that you lose yourself?
I have found I've been an entrepreneur 20 years now because I was fortunate enough to have another person in my life also see something in me that I did not see in myself. And that was someone turning to me at work one day and saying, "You would be an amazing life coach." And that was 20 years ago. So here we are. I'm a business coach now, but coaching is coaching. And I thought at the time, I'll separate my work and my personal life. But what I've found over 20 years is it's not easy for me to separate them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily need to separate them. For example, I call myself an accidental entrepreneur or an accidental activist sometimes because all I do is follow my heart. And we hear a lot about not coming from our emotions. We hear a lot about, come from a space of intellect when you're making decisions. I disagree. I think we're heart-centric beings. So I always follow my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I follow what I would call my heart's calling. Some people, of course, call it dharma or life purpose, but all I do is I answer yes to things that feel positive to me. And positivity to me is like helping others, serving others, helping the planet, animals, things like that. So if I have something in front of me, like a film project or a new student or a new retreat I want to do internationally, or an initiative with refugees or something like that, I just ask myself, do I have the capacity for this? Am I willing, able, and ready and capable of doing this, right? Because we can't save everything. We can't save everyone. We can't save the world. We can't save every animal, every tree, every person, right? But I follow my heart and I say yes to the things that I can. And if I need support, I reach out for help. So I have found a really good blend. I feel like my days are full of work, but it doesn't feel like work, and pleasure or leisure sometimes, but it also is like I'm having fun on vacation on my retreats that are business, right? I accidentally figured out how to travel the world with my business. I
Yeah.
didn't have to save money to travel because my business takes me around the world. So accidentally, I also did that.
Mm-hmm. Now, I chuckle because I totally and completely understand. The blur is intentional. The line is the line, but the blur is also the blur intentionally. And I remember having that thought of first hearing, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I said, "Oh, that's catchy." Right? That's catchy. But the longer I do what I do, I find that, like you said, it is so incredibly true. There are some days that are a little bit more work oriented, but then there are some days where the work is so much fun that you forget that you are working because your clients are happy, the retreat is a success, and you just see that it is a beautiful day. So I definitely understand there. Now, speaking of those successes, and I love how your husband used one of your successes as that kind of spark to remind you, right, of what to do in your personal life. But can you share one of those stories that comes to mind, a success of a client or a person in general, professional or community, where you saw them having that aha moment, right? And it's like they're grabbing it and then boom, they have it.
I have so many examples, but one that comes to my mind is a woman in Honduras in Central America. So I was 47 years old before I even got a passport. I was one of those people. And I went to Honduras in 2013 on a spiritual retreat. And I was awed by the beauty of the country, the people, the beaches, the rainforest, the jungle, the mountains, all of it, the food and all that. And I decided to go back in 2 years to train holistic coaches there. And coaching was not a thing there. And it was very new. Even life coaching kind of wasn't a term there. And this one woman came, there were 50 women, 50 women that came for this training. They all got free scholarships, full scholarships worth $10,000. And on the first day, Claudia came up and said, "Can you coach me in front of the group? Can you show us what this is?" And I remember coaching her for about 10 minutes about a vacation she was going to take and a swimming suit, that she wanted to wear a bikini on the beach with her family, and a goal around losing about 10 pounds to get into that bikini. And she's talked about getting up early in the morning for walks, and then she started maybe training for running and more than that. And I remember asking her during the coaching, what is it going to mean to you to have that bikini on the beach with your family in 2 months? And she just kind of had this like big light bulb moment. Like it wasn't really about the bikini. It was just like this big epiphany she had. And she said, I just had an idea. I think I might want to run a marathon. So she went from, I want to lose 10 pounds to wear a bikini to, I want to run a marathon in 10 minutes, right? She did run that marathon, by the way. She started walking, she started running, she started training. She ran the Chicago Marathon. She wrote a book. Then she traveled the world on a book tour with this book about this experience. She dedicated the book to me and said, that coaching session changed my life because I realized what I want to do now. And now she's doing it. So that's one example of what can happen when you find the thing that's meant for you and you start doing it.
I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing that. You are so right there. The power again of having the right people in your life that can assist you, that can help you, that can have that spark. I tell you, it makes all the difference in the world. And there she is, a living testament to the power of that. Great job, everyone. I love that. I love
Hey,
that.
Claudia
Right?
Zabla, if you want to look her up, Zablah, Claudia Zabla.
I love it. I love it. Now, as someone who is a social entrepreneur, you are showing us that you help people through their hurdles, but there are also some hurdles that you yourself have to get over in order to help your clients also get over those hurdles. You are making a path many times where there is no path. With that being said, there are some ways that others can encourage you as well. So, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you have had to overcome, and you were glad that someone like you was on your path?
Yes, I have struggled with building teams. That's my Achilles heel. And I think one of the reasons is I used to work in corporate and I was that person that fixed all the messes and organized all the everything. And it's hard for me, I will just speak for me because it's not hard in general, but for me personally, I found it hard to form a team where I felt that their value was what it needed to be for a social enterprise. So, for example, if someone comes on a team and they're still kind of in that corporate mentality, it's not going to work when you're in a social enterprise. It just won't. Maybe you came from nonprofit and you're kind of in that brain. And if you lean too much that way, that can be a problem. So, I don't attribute it to their anything. What I attribute it to is maybe my management style isn't what it needs to be. So, what I've decided to do about that after trying to form 3 different teams over 12 years is to hire someone to manage a team. So I hired a CEO, and that was a really big step for me because I was the founder and CEO for nearly 12 years. And I will say that this person that stepped in is a colleague I met many years ago who I learned a lot from as a colleague. And I just saw in her something that wasn't something I had as a gift, ability, or talent. So I took the big leap and I appreciated, even though she's younger than me, we've been coaching, I think, around the same amount of time. So we're pretty equal, in terms of being in the profession. But wow, was that a big game changer in my business to just surrender to hiring someone who could do that for me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that's going to be an aha moment to someone listening or someone watching. So many times, the person in our way may be ourselves. I'm not saying self-sabotaging behaviors, but just kind of slow walking the decision of should I step down? Should I do something different? And the answer is absolutely. Yes, to all of those things that you're thinking about, let someone else do that to give yourself the space, the room that you need to do the something else. I love that you were wise enough to make that decision. That is so smart. Hard to do, but so smart. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, we have a tendency to have a very purpose driven audience listener base. Folks want to know, what can I do, how do I do it, what's going to change my life, what's going to help me along this trajectory with various industries. As someone who can assist those as a trainer in purpose driven mindsets, what have you found to be some tips or some pieces of wisdom that have really encouraged those folks?
I think it's really important to think of your orbit as local, regional, national, and international. So for example, I'm from Chicago, but I was living in Nashville when I formed my business. So I really focused on things like Vanderbilt University being where I did my pilot program. Nashville is a boom town growing really fast. So I work with the Chamber of Commerce on a lot of wellness initiatives. But then I thought about what could I do regionally? And I was living in Nashville, which is within 600 miles of Nashville lives 80% of the US population. So I could drive to Chicago in one day. I can go to Atlanta and Memphis and Birmingham and Louisville. And then I thought, well, I could be a speaker in those cities. I could be a speaker in my own city because Nashville's a convention city. But if it wasn't, I would find the closest city to me and I would look on the speakers convention website for the upcoming conventions. And I would reach out to those entities like the American Nurses Association, something like that. I would contact them and I would say, I would like to be a speaker at your convention next year in my town. Then I would think about national. What national memberships can I join? What national chamber? I'm part of the LGBTQIA2S plus Chamber of Commerce in the United States. So that affords me a membership beyond my region, beyond my locality. And then I thought, well, internationally, what do I want to do? So I work with the United Nations. I work with the International Coaching Federation. So I think even with publicity, even with marketing, sure, you might do things in person where you live. Maybe you have a retail shop or you have local clients, but also think about where else might your clients be because maybe they're not where you are.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to come to where you are, like a retreat. So I think it's really important, do something locally, do something regionally, do something nationally, and do something internationally.
I could not agree with you more. I think more people need to say that, right? So many times we get stuck in our locality. Oh, it's right. It's just right here. But I want to be a booming voice in my community, and they're only thinking maybe regionally. Maybe they're local, but to them the next step is just that regional, and they're forgetting that other people need to hear their voice. And I am so grateful for the various platforms that we have nowadays where your voice is able to travel a little bit further than it would if you're not willing to drive or take a plane. That is such great advice. Such great advice. Thank you for that. Now, when it comes to the humanitarian side of what you do, and you've given us some great examples of how we can tap in, tune in, and be a part of this largest community. When it comes to humanitarian coaches, where do you see that going in the next few years? Our world is shifting from one thought to another thought to another thought to another thought so quickly. How do we make sure that we don't lose that humanitarian side of us as well?
There is a Russian woman, she lives in Los Angeles, who started something called Coaches Without Borders, similar to Doctors Without Borders.
Mhm.
And I love this concept because it's humanitarian in nature. It's kind of an homage, to the Doctors Without Borders. I think, following your heart is really interesting. It's either you're going to say yes to opportunities that are good for you or you're going to seek them, right? I am definitely a seeker, but I think I just respond well to requests. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine said, I have some friends in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, and they are refugees from the Middle East and Africa, and they are teenagers, and their parents can't work legally, but they can make money. So they're on Fiverr and they're making, video editing and stuff. And she said to me, what if we trained them as holistic coaches? And what if they could make money online? So I would have never thought of that, but I was like, wow, that's a great idea. So we did that. And one example from just that one yes is a woman who now lives in California because she's gotten her UN assignment to move for mental health reasons, by the way. So she and her son live in California now. And she's one of my students. She's one of my graduates. Her name is Parisa. And she becoming a professional certified coach, which is called a PCC credential in our industry, is so astounding. This is a woman who 26 years ago was born in Iran. I might not have her age right, but I think she's around 26. But she was born in Iran, grew up in Afghanistan. So you can only imagine why she was a refugee. Living in Malaysia for 9 years, waiting on an assignment from the United Nations, who finally got to move to California with her son, now her sister. And for her to be able to apply for contracts and UN funding and grants is something I am so proud of. I cannot tell you what this does for her and how happy it makes me that I was able to do this for her. And I'm not doing it really for her, I'm doing it with her. And that is something I think we sometimes forget how easy and simple humanitarian work is. It's about helping our neighbor. It's about responding to a friend who says, hey, I've got some people who could use some support. And I just said yes. And that yes led to not only a benefit to that group of people, which was about 20 when we started, but to now hundreds and hundreds more, because now we decided to make this program official. And we didn't really have a name for it, but now we have a name for it. It's called Rating Expansion Project. So we call it REP, right? REP Croatia, REP Malaysia, REP on the Res. And the Res is Indigenous peoples in North America. So, and that's what my films are about, by the way. So I think it's easy to be a humanitarian because you're a human, and humans naturally care for other humans. We sometimes forget about that though, don't we? But I would just say my yeses are more about, is my heart saying yes? And if it does, I act, and I act quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if a refugee needs support, you don't want to wait a year to get support, right?
Hmm. 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 If you just think about your own situation, would you want to have to wait a year? You know, as Americans, we're impatient if we don't get assistance in 5 minutes, right? So I can only imagine just the patience, the personal fortitude, the belief, the faith that it takes to say, I am going to get there. I am eventually going to be safe and be okay. I don't think people really know the story, the emotional story, the behind the scenes of what it takes to truly arrive somewhere that is safer than the country that you were born
Yes.
in.
And
That
the
is that is
irony,
amazing.
the full circle moment here is that getting a US government contract to do coaching
Yeah.
works outside of the US in the Middle East. So that's a very full circle moment for
That is
Parisa,
so awesome.
helping people in
Absolutely.
Afghanistan and Iran and Malaysia and places that she's been. So it's
Yeah,
perfection is what it is. It just is.
absolutely. I mean, bring tears to your eyes kind of moment, get goosebumps kind of moment, where you realize and you sit down and you think, like you said, this has come full circle. Oh my goodness, who would have ever thought? So I love that. I love the work that you are doing, and this is why I very much wanted to spend some time with you and to share your story, not only with our listeners, but with our viewers as well, because someone needs to know that, hey, this lady is doing it. And either I want to be just like her and do what she's doing, like exactly what she's doing, or I'm going to take her story as inspiration, as that fuel to keep me motivated to keep moving forward. So, by all means, please keep doing what you are doing. Your voice is so needed in the world today. Now, my last question for you is that there is yet another thing that you do, and that is you are also an author. With that being said, can you tell us about your most recent book? What is its title? Now, of course, we know it's available on Amazon and wherever books are sold, but please put into our remembrance its title and tell us a little bit about it.
I called my book The Qualitarian, and I made up that term when I was a vegetarian. When people would ask me, "Oh, are you a lacto ovo pescatarian?" I said, "Well, I'm a qualitarian because I only put quality food in my mouth," which at the time happened to be vegetarian. So I thought about this term beyond food, the company I keep, the thoughts I have, the emotions I express, the food I eat, the food I eat, the food I eat, because I'm a foodie. But I wrote the book thinking about the environment and social aspects of our lives, our career, our body, our money, our vacations. And I do it in a way where it's kind of coming from the coach's point of view. It's a little anecdote about something that happened to me. Like one thing I can think of from my book is no spoiler here, but when I was first married, I now am married to my second husband, but my first husband, great guy, um, it didn't work out, but we have a beautiful daughter, so no regrets. He would go to the shopping store with my little shopping list, and white rice might be on the list. And what I mean by white rice is, the top shelf Uncle Ben's in a box, and he would come home with the 50-pound bag from the bottom shelf. And I used to always complain, I don't want broken rice. I don't want the broken one. I don't want the starchy one. I don't want the one because you saved $1 buying it. What I really want is the rice that I want, and so it's not about being rich. It's about, when you're at the restaurant and you open up the menu and do you immediately go to the chicken dish because it's lower priced, to save money like my husband does, my current husband? Or do you look at the left side, not the right side, and decide, what do I want? And then look at the price, right? It's all about quality, and it's not about having extra money. I didn't have any money when I started my business, by the way. I did not have an investor. I didn't have a bank loan, and I recommend that. I recommend to start businesses without any overhead because why put stress on ourselves beyond that, right? But my book is a lot about, I've been there too. And I put a coaching tip and a qualitarian question with every chapter for contemplation. So, yeah, it's really a book about living a life of quality over anything else.
I love that. And as you were speaking, I said, there are so many overlaps here, and if only more people could hear the story of those who have walked successfully, because they too will find, do I have an overlap? Do I have something where I'm close? I agree with you. People asked me for a few years, why are you working for someone else? I thought your goal was to, be an entrepreneur, to do your own thing. And I too said the same thing. I'm not taking a loan out to start my practice. I'm just not going to be in debt to someone else. I want to be able to do it, not necessarily my way, but just without that doom and gloom, tapping me on the shoulder. So I love that you had that. And I have to agree with you with the food, right? That is our own little personal way of, to me, self care. What is the best thing that I can eat? How can I treat myself today to a little something that is going to bring me joy? And great music and great food for me are those little personal joys that I can bring myself. So I love it. I love it. I love it. And I do suggest to everyone, please pick up a copy of that book. Again, it's available on Amazon, wherever books are sold, and it very well be the thing that changes your life. Love the questions at the end. Des, thank you so much for spending some time with me here today on Passioneer Magazine, the podcast. I think you have definitely inspired someone. But before I let you go, if someone wants to reach out to you, if they want to follow you, get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
My name is Des Stephens with a Z and a PH, and my website is dezstephens.com. DEZSTEPHENS.com. Pretty unusual name. It stands for Desiree, by the way, but you can find me at dezstephens.com or radiantcoaches.com.
I love it. Thank you again for being a guest today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.